There will be a question and answer session afterwards, so do stick around.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me here. Hi, Recampaign. How are you today? Good. Great. Good energy. Well, thanks for having me and giving me a few minutes to talk with you guys. I'm really excited to be here and see the energy in the room. The work you guys are doing is awesome and inspiring, and I'm proud to be part of it. So thank you. Just to introduce myself a little bit, as Judith said, my name is Betsy Hoover. I was the director of online organizing for the 2012 Obama campaign. I first got involved working for Barack Obama in 2007 when no one anywhere knew his name. I started as an organizer in South Carolina, state in the south of the US, one of the early primary states, where people would call him Barack Obama. They did not know how to pronounce his name. He was brand new on the scene. And I was an organizer. I organized in a community, face-to-face conversations, using a lot of our traditional offline organizing models. I thought that I would go work for a candidate for 5 months and then stop working in politics and go back to my normal life that I was living, working for a nonprofit, actually, in Washington, D.C. But when I got to South Carolina, I fell in love with what the Obama campaign was doing and the way that they were organizing. They were taking traditional community-based organizing models and making that part of political campaigns, and that inspired me, so I stayed involved. In 2009, after we won in the first campaign, I was working at the Democratic National Committee in DC, and I was still on the field side, still in a traditional offline organizing capacity. And I realized that we had already gone through the internet revolution for political campaigns. Campaigns happened online, and social media was a big part of it, and all of these things. But still, what was happening online and what our volunteers were doing offline, they didn't work together very well. We had some work to do to make it kind of one holistic campaign so that people who got involved online could then get involved offline. And so I decided to make that my personal mission, to figure out how to connect those two things, our online world and our offline world. And that turned into, during the 2012 campaign, I served as our director of digital organizing, trying to bridge that gap between online and offline that I know we all struggle with so much. So to start out, what is organizing? And this is a quote that the president said that I really love. He said, "I will never forget that the only reason I'm standing here today is because somebody, somewhere, stood up for me when it was risky. And because that somebody stood up, a few more stood up. And then a few thousand stood up. And then a few million stood up. And standing up with courage and clear purpose, they somehow managed to change the world." And that's the reason that I got involved in organizing. That's why I love doing the work that I do, and that's why I believe so much in the work that so many of you are doing as well. But things changed between 2008 and 2012. In 2008, Facebook was 10% of its size. So from what it is today, it was only 10% of its size. Twitter was not even something that the Obama campaign thought about. No one was on Twitter. We had an account at the very end, but it wasn't an important piece of what we were doing. But by the end of the 2012 campaign, not only was everyone on Facebook and everyone on Twitter, but 50% of people who visited our campaign site did so through their phones. It was a different world. And so we then had to make a choice. We had to decide that we were going to stop distinguishing between online organizing and offline organizing. We were just going to call it organizing, and that was an important part of how we approached our campaign and how we moved people to action. So we chose to meet people where they are, which is a key tenet, I think, to online organizing. And for us in the campaign, this included Pinterest, this included Facebook and Twitter, obviously. But we also took a jump, and the president did an Ask Me Anything on Reddit. How many people are on Reddit? Are Redditors in here? A couple? Okay, I didn't know how. Anyway, Reddit is like an online discussion forum, and the people who are active on Reddit, they tend to be not the same people who are going to get involved in your political campaigns. They're those internet people and not those campaign people. So we decided that the best way to reach those people who we really needed to vote for us was to have the president get on Reddit and have a conversation with them to, ask me anything. They could ask the president anything, and he actually sat there on the computer and responded to their questions over the course of this session. During that time, the president asked everyone on his Reddit forum to register to vote online, which we had a little link, gottaregister.com, that he put on their discussion forum. And during that discussion, 30,000 people registered to vote off of him asking that one thing. That's not something we could have done if we would have stayed in the places we were comfortable. We had to go to where our people were, and for us, that was on Reddit in the 2012 campaign. So that's an example of how we organized online. So I'm going to talk now about a couple key tenets that I think about, or kind of framework, foundational pieces for what online organizing is. So the first, and I think about this all the time, is the ladder of engagement. How many people are familiar with that term, ladder of engagement? Okay, a couple. Great. So the ladder of engagement is the idea that if somebody is taking an action for the first time, they're probably going to take a pretty low bar action, right? So if somebody signs up to your email list, if the first thing you do is ask them to attend an event where they knock on doors and make phone calls, that's probably kind of scary, and they're probably not going to do it. So instead, you think about, what's the best ask that I can ask of this person? And that's probably based on what they've done before. So if somebody just signed up for your website, the easiest thing for them to do is probably to share. It stays in a place that they're comfortable. You know they're online. They signed up online. You can ask them to do something online. And it doesn't take a lot of time. It just takes a few seconds, and you can share. An example of a next step might be donating online. And I know that's a little different for us than it is for you, but asking people to donate online raised a huge amount of the money that we needed to win in 2012. So that would kind of be a next level of engagement. The third might be to advocate, but something, again, they can do online in a space that they're comfortable. We haven't quite moved them offline yet, but when people advocate, they're taking meaningful action that's going to make an impact offline. Then we might get them to attend an event, and then they might be able to become a leader. Those steps between donating and attending an event, those are by far the most difficult actions to get people to take online. It's the biggest jump, but they're also the most meaningful. So I spent a lot of my time really focused on how we made those big jumps, how we helped people feel comfortable taking that next step on the ladder to really become active and engaged, both online and offline. So where do we start? Maybe. I don't know. Where do we start? Well, we start, there we go. We start by defining the phases of your campaign or organization. So for us in 2012, we defined that into 3 phases. The first was to build your organization. The second was to find and talk to your people. And the third was GOTV. Who knows what GOTV stands for? What does it stand for? Get out the vote. Yep. So that was our third phase. These phases are going to look a little bit different depending on the campaign you're running and the organization you're running. These were our phases, and defining these up front was really important. One key thing here is that these phases were not just for us online. These were also the same phases that our field team, our offline organizing team had. And what that meant was we could work in sync, in tandem. And we could make sure that when I was trying to build our foundation and our list of people online, they were doing one-on-ones, developing leaders, finding people in key communities offline. So we were working in tandem there, and it allowed us to kind of ramp up at the same pace. So we'll talk a little bit about each one of those. So first, building your team. When you think of building your team, like if you're a school and you're recruiting people to play sports, right? You're recruiting your team. Who are you looking for? You're looking for really talented people who have a reason to want to come to your school, probably who work well with the other people on that team, right? It's the same concepts when you're thinking about building your team online. So these are things like growing your email list and thinking about how you do that. Growing your likes on Facebook or your followers on Twitter, building that audience so that when you make meaningful asks and when you ask people to do what you need them to do, online or offline, they're more likely to do it. You have a base of people who are able to do that. So first step is building your team. Again, this mirrors what they were doing offline in our one-on-one conversations. When somebody would sign up to our email list, we had an organizer call them right away to say, hey, welcome to the campaign, welcome to our organization, we can't wait to continue to engage with you to keep you involved. So that synergy, working really closely together, that was really important. Second really big part of this was data. And that's something we could have a whole nother conversation about. But we're not going to have that whole conversation right now. But it is a really important part to think about when someone does something online, how do I move that into my offline database? How do I make sure that my organizers know who those people are, knows what kind of action they've taken, so that the user, the person who joined your campaign and organization, they have an experience that's makes sense to them, whether they're online or offline, that they're one person to the campaign. And that's a challenging thing to do, but really, really important. The second phase, to find your people and talk to them. And this, again, this is gonna look very different for the campaign or the organization that you're running. But for us, this was about finding key constituencies that within our voting block that either needed to register to vote, that we needed to persuade to vote for us as opposed to voting for that other guy, or we needed to encourage them to turn out. We knew they were gonna support us, but we didn't know if they were actually gonna show up to the polls when we needed them to. Those universes are gonna be different, but finding them was really important. And then again, we went to find them online and we went to find them offline. And that synergy was super, super important so that the voter was getting the same message time and time again. So for us, one of the big roles that our online campaign played within that is we could reach people online that we could not reach offline. And the main reason for that is, for us, the two main ways that we reach people offline are we knock on their doors and we make phone calls. But as you guys all know, in a day where most young people in particular move a lot, have only cell phones and not landlines, and probably don't answer their phones if you don't know the person who's calling you, at least I don't, that gets harder and harder and harder. And our young voters was a group we really needed to turn out. But what we did learn is Barack Obama is friends with 98% is friends with people who are friends with 98% of voting Americans on Facebook. So think about that. That means that if every one of Barack Obama's friends shared our content, we would literally have reached the whole country. That's really powerful. And a lot of those people we couldn't reach offline. We didn't have the right phone number. They had moved. Their address was wrong. They didn't pick up when we called them. So it made targeting that group of people online effective and really important. And again, that synergy between online and offline was a key piece of why that worked. We were able to figure out who we were best at finding and then go find them. The last point I want to make on finding your people and talking to them is a little bit more on the messaging front, and you guys know this, but our message was go vote. And in the US, people that we don't like as much tend to make voting really difficult, really hard to understand, especially for the people who are least likely to do it. So our job was to make voting simple, appealing, and social. Something that people wanted to do, people wanted to be part of, and they could do really easily. And keeping that message clear, concise, to the point, and appealing, that was really important in being effective in any of this. That applies to any campaign or organization, any goal that you have. Keeping it clear, easy, accessible, and social were really important to our success. So then our final phase was get out the vote. I voted for those guys. And this was an image that we shared on Facebook. that did really, really, really well. Get Out the Vote, we had a zillion strategies to get people to vote. So I'm not going to go too in depth into this because it's a little bit unique to our concept. But the key point here is Get Out the Vote for us lasted for about 20 days. You had early vote, and then you had the days right before Election Day. And throughout the entire campaign, the campaign that started in March of 2011, those 20 days were like the holy grail. It allowed us to have a timeline that we backed out of and be really, really strategic as we raced towards those final days. And so as a result, we were able to kind of go have a full-fledged effort during that time that made us as effective as possible. So that meant our organization was already built. We had already talked to the people we needed to talk to. And now we just had one really clear message that we could say over and over and over again. Vote, 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 vote. So one other key piece here is just that people want to be part of something. And that's such an important part of what we do online, right? Today, we spend so much time looking for our cues on Facebook and on Twitter and on Instagram and on Pinterest. People want to feel like they're part of something and want to feel like there's something bigger than themselves that they're contributing to and that they're part of. And we have an opportunity to drive that message online. So one way that the Obama campaign really invested resources in doing that was through video. So I'm going to show one of my favorite videos. We created this, it's called The Story of Us. We created this video on the anniversary of the launching of the campaign, basically to remind our audience what they're part of. And what they were contributing to and how that was making a difference. So we'll take a second and watch The Story of Us.
I stand before you today to announce my candidacy for President of the United States of America. And standing up with courage, they somehow managed to change the world. Yes, we can.
Barack Obama has won the Iowa caucuses.
You have done what the cynics said we couldn't do.
He's the first candidate we've ever seen who had an organization that brought together the internet and community organizing.
He makes me care, and he makes me want to get up and go and do something with my life.
The next Vice President, Joe Biden.
I move Senator Barack Obama be selected by this convention as the nominee of the Democratic Party for President of the United States.
I accept your nomination for presidency of the United States.
A small-town mayor is sort of like a community organizer, except that you have actual responsibilities.
A fist bump, a pound, a terrorist fist jab?
Fist bump, please.
Oh, yeah. All right.
First shot, straight through. That's how you perform under pressure.
After a hard-fought battle, it all boils down to today.
11 p.m. on the East Coast, and we have news. There will be young children in the White House for the first time since the Kennedy generation.
I, Barack Hussein Obama, do solemnly swear.
And so it began. He faces a severe economic crisis at home and an increasingly dangerous world abroad.
I don't know how passing healthcare will play politically, but I know it's right. We are going to get this done. We are going to make history.
The most persistent fly I've ever seen. Nice.
Now, where were we?
I signed this bill for my daughters and all those who will come after us. So in love. We are not a nation that says, don't ask, don't tell. We are a nation that says, out of many, we are one. This is done. The United States has conducted an operation that killed Osama bin Laden, the leader of Al-Qaeda. One of the first decisions that I made as president was to save the U.S. auto industry from collapse. I am sending this Congress a plan called the American Jobs Act. You should pass this jobs plan right away. This is a make or break moment for the middle class and for all those who are fighting to get into the middle class. Welcome home. Welcome home. If you stick with me, we're going to finish what we started in 2008. America, we have come so far. We have seen so much, but there's so much more to do.
Yeah, that's one of my favorites too. But what I love about that is it reminds people, it makes you feel a certain way. It reminds you that there's a story that our people were part of. There's a narrative that they were making happen, and there was a mission, a larger vision for the country that they believed in and took risks for. And that's what building a team, building a community, and organizing, a big part of what it's about. So I'm just going to spend a minute on talking about tools, and then we'll move to questions. But one thing I really learned in 2012 that I actually don't know that I understood as clearly when I started is how much your tools matter. And I feel like that's something that we all struggle with all the time. What's the best kind of combination of tools to make sure that I can do what I want to do online and my users are having the experience that I want them to have. We chose on the Obama campaign to build all of our tools in-house, almost all of our tools in-house. And that was a huge gift. It was a huge investment of resources from our campaign team that the foresight there was just really impressive because it allowed us to tailor our tools for the organization that we were building. Most organizations can't do that. Most campaigns can't do that. And so thinking through creative ways to solve that question, solve that problem of what tools we're going to use to make up our infrastructure is really important. So I just want to emphasize that building tools is hard. I spent a lot of time working with our engineers. I'm not an engineer, but I spent a lot of time working with our engineers to build the perfect tool. And we had a year and a half to do it. I know, it's distracting me. We had a year and a half to do it, and many things we wanted to do didn't get done even in that amount of time. So when you're thinking about this puzzle, it's an important puzzle to think about. It's an important investment to make early on for any organization. And this is an important piece to remember, is that building these tools are really hard. And so thinking about what those most important things are, not the bells and whistles, but that core infrastructure was really key for us. All right, we're moving on from that. So does this work? I'm going to tell 3 quick stories, a minute each, but just proving that online organizing and engagement really does work. So my first example is Clara in Colorado. And Clara, I learned about later on in the campaign. We wrote a blog about her and eventually did another video. But Clara registered to vote for the first time in 2012. She could have voted in 2008. She didn't have time to register to vote, didn't think it was important. She did it because her friends were doing it. She saw that her friends were doing it and heard that her friends were doing it. And she did it through our online tools. So she went to gotoregister.com. She signed up to vote, or she signed up to register to vote. She printed off her application and mailed it in. Clara was one of a million people that did that over the course of the 2012 campaign because we invested in building tools and then in marketing those tools in an effective way. When Clara filled out her application to register to vote, she got a call from an organizer that night saying, hey, we saw that you filled out your form online. Did you print that off? Did you mail it in? Again, helping Clara make that jump from an action she took online to something she needed to do offline, print that form off and mail it in. So this worked for Clara and a million other people like her. The second example is Michael in Florida. And Michael, Florida has a really complicated voting process. And one of the and their legislators there don't make it any easier. And so one of the challenges in Florida is that at the last second, they opened a couple polling places later than they anticipated doing, or than they told us they were going to do. And so when that happened, our job was to find all the people affected by that change and send a rapid response email out to them saying, your voting details have changed. Tell everyone you know. And Michael got that email, and he knew that because he's a really good voter and he was really paying attention, but his friends didn't necessarily. So Michael shared our kind of graphic that said, your information is, your voting details have changed. And as a result, more of his friends knew where to go, and we were able to kind of effectively communicate with our organization. And the third example is Mary in Ohio. Mary's one of my favorite stories. Mary came to one of the online organizing tools that we built called Dashboard. She signed up to see, what's this whole Obama campaign thing about. She saw other people in her neighborhood who were getting involved and making a difference on a regular basis. And she signed up for an event. Later on, maybe the next day, the organizer in her area saw that Mary had come online, gave her a call and said, hey, welcome to our Toledo, Ohio operation. We can't wait for you to be involved. Why don't you come on into the office tomorrow? We'll sit down and have a conversation and talk about what else you can do here in Toledo. That started a relationship with that organizer. And by our GOTV, by our final phase, Mary was a leader, a neighborhood team leader. She was organizing other people. And actually, when new volunteers were coming to Dashboard, coming to our site to get involved, Mary was the one calling them and saying, I got involved just like you. Come on into the office. There's a lot of work to do. We really need you. And that was because of that circle, because she came in, she saw real people, she saw her neighbor, she saw people she could relate to. Someone reached out to her and said, come on, we need you on board. And then she did, and she made a huge difference in helping elect the guy that we saw before. So just wrapping up, online organizing is a set of principles, not tactics. And I really believe that. I've tried to say several times in the past couple minutes, regardless of the campaign that you're running or the organization you're running, regardless of the resources you have or the time period you have or the tools you have, there's a set of principles. And I think if we approach organizing with those principles in mind, we can figure out the tactics to get there. And they're going to look a little bit different for each one of our campaigns and organizations. So the four principles I boil online organizing down to is the first, empowerment. How you give people the tools they need to make the difference they want to make when they're inspired. Two is participation. How do you show people that their participation matters? How do you give people that narrative, that larger picture, that story of us, that allows them to feel like they're working for something bigger than themselves, something that really matters to their community? The third is a force multiplier. Being able to organize and engage a larger number of people than you have the human resources to do. Not every person needs to be face-to-face with an organizer all the time. That touch is really important, but once they're inspired, how are they able to take that collective action with the tools that are in front of them? And the fourth is relationship-based organizing. Whether you're online or offline, the human-to-human interaction, the human-to-human relationships that you build, it's key to having an organization that lasts. One thing that was kind of a mantra for us on the campaign is people came for Barack Obama, but they usually stayed for the community. They stayed for each other. They stayed for their organizers. And I believe that so much. When people believe in a cause, it's easy for that to feel far away at times when the organizing or the action can seem hard or scary or out of their comfort zone. So keeping that relationship-based focused in mind is just hugely important, no matter how you accomplish that. If you follow these, then online organizing, I think, can work for you. And I know it was a huge part of what elected our president in November. So thank you guys so much. We're gonna...
No, you keep it. You need to answer
Yeah,
the question. Thanks a lot.
Of course.
The floor is open to you if you have questions. We have two people who are going to go around. Maybe, yeah, who has a question? Come on. Oh, over here? Okay. Over there?
Looking back to the campaign, can you say, or are you willing to say what your average budget per voter was? Or how many people also worked for free for you?
It's a great question. Budget per voter was too different across the country. It wasn't consistent, so that's a hard number to peg. Average, or number of people that worked for us for free, the campaign engaged over 2 million volunteers. So over 2 million people took action at some point for the campaign on a voluntary basis. And that was anything from, that didn't necessarily count our donors, but that was anything from went door to door for us, worked 10 hours a week for us, to signed a petition or took a lower bar action. But over 2 million people engaged in some way on the campaign.
Hi, Betsy. My name is Timo. I was just wondering, it's almost a follow-up question to what was just asked. How much actually paid staff did you have within the digital team?
We had a huge digital team. There were over 200 of us. And then in addition to that, we had 75 people working in the States strictly on digital. So it was a huge, our campaign put a lot of resources into it. For us, the biggest thing is we made the money back to pay for all of those people through the online fundraising we were able to do, which was a big reason why we were able to make that investment. But yeah, we had a big team. So over 200, almost 300 total.
Hi, I'm Dörte from Hamburg. I'm very impressed by this special action phone call. I think I heard it 3 times during your speech that you called the people. So this seems to be a main aspect. Would you say that?
Yeah, I would say it was the main aspect. I would say it was the first touch point that connected online and offline. So it was the first chance that our organizers had to talk to these people face to face. It was kind of like they self-selected when they took an action online, and then we reached and tried to pull them up that ladder of engagement with that phone call. It wasn't the only way that we did that, but it was probably the clearest and the most consistent and the most valuable for our organizers. We saw the greatest returns from it.
Hello? Yeah, Hendrik from Germany.
Hi.
You talked, I have a question about the digital Obama. He seems to be like the person who also does the post, or you can think of. In Germany, we have these candidates that are almost pretending to be digital. So my question is, how important is the candidate to be a true digital, or can a candidate that is probably not a digital native be also a digital campaigner or a person to campaign about? Yeah, sort of that.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that they have to be. But I do think you make a really good point. And this gets to, it's a set of principles, not tactics. Who Obama was as a candidate was 100% our best asset, without a doubt. All the rest of this was fodder to that. But if he hadn't been able to engage on Reddit in that way, Some of it we could have done for him, and that's important to know. But some of it we probably wouldn't have done because we needed our candidate to be authentic in that. So no matter what, I think you build a digital campaign around your candidate. You have to now. But how you do that is definitely dependent on who your candidate is, and it's not going to be one size fits all. We were really lucky with this guy. He's a great candidate, and you know, he allowed us to run an awesome online campaign. But you know, I just think you solve the problem in a different way with a different kind of candidate.
Okay, one
Ich habe noch hin.
last question.
Hier.
Okay, there are 2 more questions, and then that would be it.
Hi, I'm Andy, and my question is, did you try to lobby to change the process of voting? Because I heard that in America, in some states, some areas, you had to wait 6 to 8 hours on a work day to be able to work, which a lot of poor and black people simply can't afford.
Yep, it's the worst thing about our process, and it got worse during 2012, not better. If there's one thing that, like, if today I could change one thing about our entire campaign process, it would be that. It's crazy and awful. Not everywhere, but in a lot of places. We did try, as the campaign, to do some things to continue to make voting easier. We had an awesome voter protection team that did a lot of work. There's also an element in a campaign where lots of these battles are long-term. They're not going to be won in one cycle. So a campaign can only do so much. But there are organizations out there now working to change it for next time. It's something I'm super passionate about. It's messed up. And you're right about the people who are affected. So it's something we really have to work on as part of our electoral process.
Hi, I'm Birgit from Berlin. I signed up for the campaign to follow it because I was curious.
Awesome.
I got a lot of email. That's not what I was taught a few years ago. I was always taught you don't send people too much email because they disengage. It seems like you went completely the other way, and I assume you did that because it works. Can you tell a little bit about that?
Yeah, I can. So 2 things. You probably got more email than the average person because you kept doing things.
No, I didn't. I lurked.
Okay, then you still got a lot of email. That's fine. This is really interesting because I was taught the same thing. The campaign was completely focused on testing everything. We tested everything. So when we would send a fundraising email, there was sometimes over a dozen segments of that email to figure out which one performed the best. We hardly ever did anything without proving that it worked. So you're right, we did it because it worked. We tested on the campaign at what point people would kind of fall off. And we basically never hit that point with the number of emails that we sent. That isn't true for every organization. So my lesson out of this would not be send a ton of email every day. It was a lot. We had like a 40-person email team. We put a lot of resources into it, and it worked for us, both from mobilization and fundraising and messaging. We proved that it worked. But the lesson I would really ask people to walk away with is test, 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 test. And figure out what the right amount of email is for your organization and your campaign, and how people are responding to that. We had an urgency, we had an end date, we had a candidate that people already knew and generally really liked, and so we didn't see those negative impacts, but you might. So test everything is kind of how I would message that.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you guys so much. Have a good rest of your day.